Hello and welcome to our week 2 introduction to programming. If you are new to this particular channel, I kindly request that we subscribe so that we can continue to share more materials with you, and every time we share, you don't miss out. So this is our week 2 and our lesson 2.1. We're going to be learning about a basic C program. If you have not watched the videos on week 1, kindly check out on them. At the end of this particular session, my expectation is that we shall be able to understand a basic structure of a C program. Number 2, we should be able to know each and every part or a component of a C program. And 3, we should be in a position to write and execute a simple C program. In terms of outcomes, it's for us as students to identify the essential components of a C program, to be able to write a C program that incorporates those particular statements, and be in a position to relate the execution of a program using real-life analogies. And to the introduction, whenever you think of a program in C, think it as a recipe that is used for baking a cake. Now, whenever you are having a cake, you normally bake a cake on the basis of a recipe. And that particular recipe normally has specific ingredients. Additionally, it normally has the steps that are supposed to be followed. In the same case, a C program will of course also have what we are referring to as the specific components or ingredients and the steps that should be followed for the task to be executed. So whenever we think of a C program, let's think of it as a simple, and understanding these components will help us to be able to write our programs and understand how they work. Now let's look at the components that make a C program. The first component that make up a C program is what we refer to as the preprocessor directives. Now, imagine you are baking a cake. The first thing that you need to do is to check the ingredients list to ensure that everything that you need to be in a position to bake that particular cake is there. This could be terms of sugar, could be terms of flour, could be terms of eggs, and so on and so forth. In the same way, whenever you are dealing with a C program, the first thing that is always checked is the necessary ingredients, which is done by something called a preprocessor directive, which we normally begin with a hash include. Now, this directive normally tells the compiler to bring in certain libraries that are needed for the execution of that particular program. More or less like how you can't bake a cake if you haven't set your ingredients well. Now, within the C program, we normally have what we refer to as the hash include stdio.h. Now, this is a directive in C or a file in C that normally includes what we refer to as the standard input-output library. Now, its responsibility is to provide the functionalities that are necessary for both the inputs as well as the output operation. Now, these are some of the things that are normally included in that particular header file. The first is the input-output functions, something like a printf, so that whenever you use that word, printf, it's going to be understood what it means in respect to the inclusion of that particular header file. Scanf, which is used to normally capture inputs from the keyboard. The getChar, which is normally used to pick a single character, as well as the putChar, and so on and so forth. Some file functions like fopen, fclose, fread, fwrite, and so on and so forth. So anytime we use some of these words, or what you can refer to as reserved keywords, without inclusion of that hash include stdio.h, we are going to encounter an error. So we must include it as an ingredient or as a preprocessor directive within our particular program. Number 2 is the function definition. Just like within a factory, we always have a main entrance. and it's on to that particular main entrance where all the operations begin. So in the same case within our program, we always have the starting point for every particular program. Now in C, we have something called main and within the bracket. So this becomes the entry level of each and every program in C. And this is where the execution of a program starts. In other words, just like within a building, we always have that main entrance where each and every person ought to get in through. Our execution must always begin where we are having the main function. So the main function is where the program starts. It's where the program runs. So anytime you write a C program, the first thing that is going to happen is that we are going to look for where is the main. And once we find it, the execution can go ahead and begin. The next part or the next component is what we refer to as the statements or the instruction. Once you have gotten your ingredients, once you have gotten your recipe, then you normally have the step-by-step instructions that are undertaken. For example, mix the flour and sugar, bake the cake at 350 degrees Celsius. In C programming, these are the statements that we normally write, and these are the statements that we expect to be displayed to us on the screen. Remember, when we are looking at the preprocessor directives, we said that the inclusion of a hash include stdio.h, it contains certain files, and those particular files will contain the meaning of some of the words that we are going to incorporate. So within the main function, that's where we are going to write our statements as well as our instruction. For example, in C, whenever we say printf within the bracket hello world, what we are simply doing, we are issuing an instruction to our given computer, and we are telling our computer to do something for us. In this particular case is display the word hello world onto the screen. We go ahead. So this is just a simple C program that's supposed to output for us School of Engineering to the screen. So we are going to combine all the components that we have actually learned above to explain this. Now we have said that we normally have to begin with a hash include stdio.h. And we have said the reason as to why we normally incorporate these is so as to bring on board certain function names that normally carry meaning within our given program, so that now when you incorporate it, it becomes possible for it to be interpreted. The first statement that should always be there is the hash include, more or less like you have to bring all your ingredients before you begin to bake that particular cake. Now main, we have said that's where the execution normally begins from. Now the reason as to why you can see these 2 forward slash, we are going to learn about this. We refer to them as comments. And comments normally help us in understanding what is happening at that given point, so that anyone else looking at it can be able to understand what is happening. So you can write in absentia of them, or you can incorporate them too. This is the program hash include stdio.h. Then we have the int main. It's normally followed by these 2 brackets. Immediately after that, we normally have this opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. Now the reason as to why we are doing this main, which is we have said that it's the main entrance of our given program, and this is where the execution begins. We are going to have a series of statements that are supposed to be written here. And because main is a function, because it's supposed to do something for us, we have to wrap it with what we're referring to as an opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. So always ensure that every time you write your main, it has this opening curly bracket and a closing curly bracket. So let's explain some of these things in details. The hash include stdio.h. We have said that just like we normally gather ingredients before we begin baking a cake, it's always good to gather all the necessary libraries before we begin writing our program. So the hash include stdio.h is a library that normally contains the printf function. So whenever now we use these, or we include the hash include stdio.h, and we go ahead and use the word printf, then it's going to be understood. Now, the int main, we have said that it's a function which marks the starting point of our program. And so, every time we are to write a statement, we have to ensure that that particular statement is written inside our int main. Now, the next thing is the statement sections, where the steps or the instructions are normally written. So we have the printf School of Engineering. In that particular case, we are issuing an instruction. So the printf is a function that does a specific role, and that particular role is just to print whatever is within the double quotes in the screen as it is. That's the first thing that I want us to. Whenever we are writing this particular statement, we are going to realize that it has a semicolon at the end because it's a statement. Just like we normally have an English sentence that must have as a full stop at the end, a statement in C must have a semicolon at the end. So take note of that. Something else that I need to mention about, we have seen these two forward slashes. We refer to them as comments. And there are two ways we can actually incorporate those comments. Whenever you are commenting a line, you can use those two forward slashes as you have seen there. And anytime or any statement that follows that two forward slash is going to be treated as a comment. In the event you have multiple lines and you want to comment all of them as a block, then we normally put the forward slash and an asterisk beginning or at the start of the first line, and a closing asterisk and a forward slash at the end of the last line. Now, what do comments do? One of it is to help us in code explanation. Comments help to explain the complex logic so that it makes it easier for others who are looking at your code to understand the purpose and the functionality of those particular bits. Number two, it helps us in documentation. They are good sources of documenting in terms of whether we are dealing with the variables, functions. We are able to know what each of those particular components undertakes. Number three, they help in debugging. So sometimes you are writing your code and you encounter certain errors and you are not able to understand where something or what's wrong with your code. Instead of deleting that piece of code, you can comment. And whenever you comment a given piece of code, that particular code will never be executed. So the last one is about improving readability. It makes it easier for someone to read as well as navigate within your given program. The last bit is the return 0, which is an indication of a successful execution. More or less like once you're done with your recipe, you may inform the other people that my cake is done. So in C, every execution normally returns something. So whenever we're incorporating these the return 0, it indicates a successful compilation and execution of our particular program without any given error. So anytime we are writing a program, the first thing is start with the recipe. In other words, always ensure that your program starts with a hash include. Number two, always follow the instruction by ensuring that you always begin with an int main, which is the entry point of your program, and then begin writing your printf statements. After that, always indicate that you have successfully completed the execution of your program by finishing with the statement return 0. Now, I want us to modify our particular program such that now it doesn't print School of Engineering, but we now want to print Joe Doe, which is the name. So you can as well change. You can see we are already changing this particular bit. You can change and put your registration number, put your name, and so on and so forth. As we come to an end, we have learned out about the hash include, which I have said it's more or less like gathering of the necessary ingredients before we start baking. So you must always ensure that you have that hash include. The int main, we have said that it's the starting point of your program. The printf, we have said that it's responsible for displaying the output exactly as it appears within the double quotes. And we have said that a semicolon must be included. And finally, we have said that the return 0 indicates that the program has finished successfully. So in this lesson, we covered basic structures in C. We learned about the preprocessor directives, which is the hash include, the main function, the steps that we normally follow, and the return 0. Thank you for watching. And I look forward to seeing you in our next lesson, where we shall be looking at how do you run a C program.